My name's Katie Weaver, and I am a survivor of childhood sexual assault where I was abused in my grandmother's basement by my uncle. Grew up in Mansfield, a small town in Ohio between Cleveland and Columbus. I was born and raised here. I actually grew up 2 houses down the street from my grandmother. I was 4, right turning 5, and that is when the abuse started. My uncle had unlimited access to me. My uncle that abused me is my paternal uncle. He's my mother. My mother is the oldest of 4 children, and he is the youngest. We moved into my childhood home where I lived for many years after. And my first memory, I believe he abused me before I can remember, just based off things my paternal grandfather had told me while he was still here. And I had looked forward to that night, and I can't remember it. And I remember what happened before it. I remember afterwards him saying to me, if you tell anybody this, like, your brother won't exist anymore. I will end the life of your infant brother. I will kill your little brother if you ever repeat this. From the time I was 5 until I was 11, almost every time I was at grandma's, I was abused. Maybe not raped every time, molested. I consider it all to be about the same on a child. We're not talking about my 35, 40, 50-year-old uncle. At the time, we're talking about my 15-year-old uncle. So we are 2 minors at the time. My mother calls me into the living room and she says, Katie, this guy 2 houses up the opposite side of the street, he just got out of prison and he's a sex offender, and I need you to know what this means. And she sits me down and she's gonna explain to me the dangers of this guy. And I said, I just start to cry. I had tried to muster up the courage so many times before to tell her and just froze. And I start hysterically crying. And my mom says, did someone do this to you? And I said, yeah. And she names everybody but, he was the last one named, her little brother. She says his name and you're kidding me, right? And she's just in complete shock because this is a baby that she has taken part in raising in her eyes. You know, she's the oldest, and my grandmother was my grandpa was an over-the-road truck driver, so my mother raised all of these kids. So to her, this is, basically like my brother, and not only my brother, but my brother to, you're kidding, right? And my mom is pretty reactive. She grabbed me and we headed, I remember it's raining. My grandmother's got a covered porch with a roof, and my mother goes in the house. And I remember standing on the porch. My grandmother didn't know I was there. My mother goes in and says, Alvin sexually abused Katie for a long time, Mom. And my grandmother already knew because when I was 7 years old, she opened the door to it. And my grandmother says, if you'd pay more attention to this child, she wouldn't be making things like this up about your brother. And my mom came unglued. And just at the perfect time, he was in prison and the phone rings. And, the caller ID is on the TV screen back in the day. And it says Ohio Department of Corrections. And I remember I could see that. Oh, he's getting it. My mom answered the phone. You tell Mom what you did to Katie. You tell her right now. My mother is intimidating. To them. And he starts spilling on a recorded prison line. I'm sorry, and never once calls me a liar. My grandmother demands, shut your mouth, you're already incarcerated. And he did. She took the phone from my mom, and she kicked us out of the house, and she didn't let us back in that house for, I'm going to say it was 2 years. She kicked my mother, who was freshly divorced. My mom and dad went through a separation, and now my grandmother's just said, you guys are all kicked out of the family. Even my poor little brother that never had anything to do with anything. That was probably the safest time of my life, to be away from all of those people. Now I want to tell you, when I want to say 5 or 7 years old, my grandmother he had the door locked, but she got in it somehow. She just pushed the door open. And my grandmother has a heavy, West Virginian accent. And she says, what are you doing to her? Like, she's in complete shock. And she shut the door and she went upstairs, and that was that. My grandfather came home later that night, came down the stairs. I'm still down there. I hadn't been down there all day, but I'm back down there at this point. And we were playing cards. I'll never forget it. My uncle had a deck of cards in his hand, still a kid. My grandfather comes downstairs and he hit him in the back of the head so hard that deck of cards went flying. And just being, at that age, I had no way to process all the emotions that I had. And I loved him. And I remember feeling so bad for that, because as an adult, I look back and I said, that's child abuse too. Like, this kid never had a chance either. So when I'm standing on the porch listening to my grandmother say, even when her son's admitting it, when I'm listening to her say, she's lying, knowing at 12 years old, knowing, what do you mean I'm lying? You opened the door and you've seen it. And my mother didn't know that at the time. And I remember telling her just a few days later, and her just being beside herself. This is all normal to my mom. This is generational. Her sister was abused by her uncle. Her uncle abused her. She abused my uncle, her own little brother. My grandmother knew about it, put a stop to it, but never offered her counseling intervention services. Grandma ends the prison phone call quickly. It's not really left up for discussion very long because she doesn't want to add to his charges. So that call's ended, and a few days later, my mother went and visited. Back then, it wasn't through glass. It was in, a cafeteria style. So my mom goes in and, being the nice, calm woman she is, yells, "You molested and raped your own niece," to the whole. He spent 364 days in solitary confinement after that. So he gets out for that. This is burglary. This is the neighbors right across the street from my grandma's house. Like, this is our neighbor. So he gets out for that, and he completes his probation, does all this. And then he meets my now aunt, Jackie. He meets Jackie, and they begin a relationship, and Jackie's a minor at the time. She's in 9th grade, I believe it was 9th or 10th grade, and her dad finds out, and he's like, this relationship is not happening. Well, her dad was a bailiff with the court, well known around the county, so he's calling the police. He's reporting her missing, doing everything a parent does if you wake up and your little girl's gone in the middle of the night. And finally, a slip-up happens. They made a video together. Rather, his friend recorded a video of the two of them, and another friend stole that video out of his closet and had it at home, using it for his own, purposes. And he, at the time, is on probation. The friend's probation officer busts in one day. They raid the friend's house, and they find that video, and here's this minor child performing sex acts on it with my uncle. He goes to prison for, he was charged with attempted rape, several things. Those original charges, I'm not positive, but he was sentenced for pandering. So pandering sexually oriented material of a minor. So he gets out of prison, and one of the first people he asks to see is me. So he's out for a few days, and she's living in the basement of my grandparents' house, despite the no cohabitation rule, despite him not supposed to be around her. She's living in my grandparents' basement when he gets out. So he gets out of prison, and my grandfather calls my mom, says, Alvin wants to talk to Katie. I go down there. I'm 14 at the time, 13 or 14. They let him take me into a room, shut the door, and he hugs me and says, "I am so sorry for everything I did to you. I'm so sorry." And I'm a kid at the time still. And, my mom, we're already back in the family. What good's it going to do me at that point? And to be honest with you, at that point, I didn't want to be hateful or hostile towards him. I said, "I forgive you, and I love you too." And I didn't want anybody to talk about him, and I wanted him to have a second chance at life. It wasn't until many years later, when I grew up and walked away from my family, that I realized that I had been groomed by all of them to participate in this, and to keep my mouth shut about it when I wasn't there. I was born into a family that is full of addicts and pedophiles. My red flags didn't go unnoticed. Back then, you didn't talk about things like this like you do now. My grandfather, my father's dad, told my mom he said I was about 8 or 9. Candy's brother is molesting Katie. Straight up just said it. Alvin is molesting Katie. And he was told, "You're crazy." He might be a little off, but he would never do that. He wasn't crazy. He knew. He saw something. My mom, she beats herself up about this, and she's the reason that I say that this began sooner. She took me to a shoe store at 2 years old, and she said there was a male and a female shoe associate, She said the woman took my little shoe size and I was just fine, smiling. And she said this man came towards me with the box of shoes to put them on me. And she said I screamed at the top of my lungs. I ran out of the shoe store. And again that day, my dad's sister said, if I didn't know any better, I would say somebody has sexually abused her. And I was only 2 then. I started drinking when I was only 11 years old. This wasn't really that, it was hidden. My family knew I had a problem, both sides. My mom would try to tell my mom how bad my problem was, and I knew how to manipulate my mom. And I would say, she's lying on me, because she did lie on me a lot. So I would always say that. She's lying on me. I'm not an addict. I don't drink too much. I don't take anything. I don't have any problems. That lie didn't get me very far, because from 11 till I had my daughter, I was a complete raging alcoholic. I was 23 when I had my daughter, and she changed my life because she was born at 18 weeks early. So she only weighed 1 pound. And when I never wanted any kids to begin with. And then I got pregnant with Izzy and I stopped drinking. I stopped doing everything I was doing. I cut the whole family out once I knew I was having a little girl. My grandmother came to the hospital when she was born, and something about seeing her hold Izzy, even though we still had a close relationship, I couldn't do it anymore. I was done. That was the start of being done with all of them when I had my daughter. And when I was a little girl, I had a life-size Barbie, a 3-foot tall, and it had the white gown and all of that. And my grandmother got it for me for Christmas. So it stayed at her house in the basement. I played with it because I was there all the time. Well, my uncle would put that outfit on me and say, because there was always a game of house, he'd say, oh, be the wife, be the mommy, wear this. And he'd sexually abuse me while I was wearing it. Well, I remember he stole my grandma's wedding band one time. And he put that band on my finger and abused me. And my grandmother looked for this ring for so long. And one day he put it back and it reappeared. And I don't remember if he said he found it or he had found, she had put it somewhere and he had found it. Either way, she praises him for finding this ring. And when my daughter was born, I had to stay in Mansfield. They life flight her to Akron. And I get a picture sent to my cell phone of Izzy and my grandmother holding that ring beside her. She wanted to put it on her arm to show how small she was. But my mother didn't know this. My grandmother didn't know this. But there's where you have to respect boundaries, because I said, don't put that ring. They asked me, can we put this on her arm to show her size? I said, do not put that ring on Izzy. And I wasn't respected. And next thing, literally, here's my little tiny baby. And here's this ring that I was sexually abused wearing laying right beside her. And that's I can never unsee that. It traumatized me. And that's when I really these people don't respect my boundaries. They're not getting access to my daughter. We're out of here, Between the ages of me being 11 and having Izzy, my family caused me complete chaos. Anytime I spoke of what happened to me, or even if my family would encounter somebody that knew me, it was, Katie takes trend. She's on all kind of because she lied on our uncle. There's police reports. My aunt was charged with felonious assault because I was drinking and mentioned him sexually abusing me at a campground. He would beat on my door all hours of the night. I graduated high school, and the very first thing I looked to do was get the hell out of my mom's house, because at the time my mom could still manipulate my dad against me and have him mad at me. So I said, I'm getting out of here. I'm getting away from all these people. My childhood sweetheart, his name was Derek. He was raised with his grandma. He lived in the trailer park that my aunt did, and I was just head over heels for him. And me and Derek got married. Then we had Derek and I had our second son. Izzy was 12 months old, I think. 18 months old. No, let me think. Izzy was 14 months old when I had my second son. Also premature. And Derek and I married 2 months after that. And yeah, we've been together happily ever since. We have been together now for 16 years. My healing journey has been just all over the map. And I remember a time thinking, I'm never going to get any better. I'm always going to be this quiet. I would just cry. I still cry, but I would cry in private. Now I'll cry in public, but and I would just feel like I'm never going to overcome this. So the start of my healing journey has nothing to do with my family, really, or my, kids. The start of my real healing journey. When I started to write, I started to post on TikTok. get online and I say to 70,000 followers at the time, I'm going to publish a book. And these women are like, they're not supporters. They are beyond supporters. They are like God sent. These, not just women, men and women on this app. And they're like, publish that book, sis, and put it all on blast. And then, you know, telling me to do illegal stuff. They're just giving me all these suggestions. And when you publish this book, we're going to support you. We're going to support you. You've opened this doorway up for me, this doorway up for me. And when I published my book, people came back like, despite the things you have said on here, there's nothing that could have prepared me for the stuff that you wrote. And it was just heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, and the world needed to see it. Survivors needed to see it. So my healing journey hasn't been alone. Like, I was so alone, like my whole upbringing. And when I get on here and I find there's a community for everybody. I didn't know that until I got online. Like, there's a community for literally everybody. And I found mine. Heal as loud as they hurt you. That is my number one go-to. Heal as loud as you were hurt. My grandma wants me to be quiet. No, he wasn't quiet when he did that to me. You know, heal as loud as they hurt. And it's the motto I live by now. And my healing journey has been just spectacular. If you're in a position where you feel like because somebody's family to you that you owe them your mental health over things that have happened to you, I want to say that going no contact with your family is an absolute last resort. But when you have a group of people enabling and supporting your childhood sexual abuse and the person that did it to you, that it is always okay to walk away from that and put yourself first.